Thank you for tuning into White Centipede Noise Podcast. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so via Patreon, which is linked in the video's description. White Centipede Noise is a label and mail order based in Germany, releasing top quality noise on tape, CD, and vinyl. White Centipede Noise is also the premier EU-based distributor of international noise, carrying hundreds of titles from a wide variety of underground labels, both large and small. Visit whitecentipedenoise.com to see available label releases and weekly distro updates. Hello and welcome to White Centipede Noise Podcast. My name is Oscar Brummel, and today our guest is Ilkka Vekka from the project HAARE, hailing from Finland. Welcome, Ilkka. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
Nice to be here.
Great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. We'll start off with, I guess, kind of a banal question that I think I still have to ask most people. What was your introduction to noise music and your path to it, and what brought you there? What made you a fan, and what made you start to want to record on your own as an artist?
I think the first contact probably was reading about Einstürzende Neubauten when I was like 11, and later hearing them, then through grindcore, finding noisecore, finding gerogeri gegege, finding the boredoms, and through them finding all the Japanese stuff. Hijokaiden was a huge influence. I went to art school in Lahti in, I think it was 98, and I had a band before that. It was like this improv, hardcore, noise, weirdo thing. But when that stopped, I started doing things on my own. And that's like how it began in 1999.
Okay. So you were young, but you weren't like a teenager. You were maybe you'd already been in bands and things like that. So you came to it through punk and grindcore, noisecore background. Okay, so how old were you roughly by the time you started doing HAARE, and was that your first noise project?
Atari Satan was in, I think, 95 or 96.
Which product? Sorry?
Atari Satan.
Ah.
And I was, in 95 I was 21.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so proper age for, I think.
Yeah.
There's a really great, by the way, for everyone out there listening, there's a really, really great collection that just came out in the last year or so on Freak Animal Records of pretty much your entire, or maybe a selected HAARE discography called Destroy Fascism, Love Forever.
Yeah.
Does that include, are there any things that you left out of that, like from the early?
Some. The earliest stuff is so different that it was left out, and there was also some things that I couldn't find anymore.
Yeah.
And some things that didn't sound so good anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but like the early HAARE was very much inspired by Incapacitants and Hijokaiden,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like pretty simple wall of noise,
Mm-hmm.
screeching, and like I don't know if that needs any reissuing.
Sure. So you use guitar pretty heavily with HAARE. Were you using guitar at that time too?
I started using a turntable. That was the first thing, was using a turntable and pedals. But then, like, the guitar is such a versatile thing. You can get. I don't know how to play guitar. I'm not a guitarist.
Okay.
I don't know any chords or anything, but I've been learning how to get different sounds out of it.
That's something I actually wanted to ask about, is because I assume you've been using guitar since the early recordings, but even when I go back to listen to those earliest recordings on the box set, I wouldn't identify that as a guitar. You're not playing the strings like sometimes you hear people doing noise guitar and they're plucking the strings and making the strings go wild, and you notice, okay, that's a mangled guitar, but you seem to be using it really as a feedback instrument, and you don't hear the strings really striking at all until, I was listening to Brain last night, one of your most recent albums, which I will show here, highly recommended, on Aussat. Might be still in print, but I think it's actually sold out. And on this album, you have some passages where you hear strumming, you hear what's clearly a guitar, still played in a non-melodic way, but it's identifiable. Was there ever a transition where you began using the guitar in a slightly more traditional sense, or was that kind of just? Am I wrong in that the earlier recordings, you really don't strum it?
Yeah, you're right. It has to do with the fact that at some point most recordings were like really long, at least like usually 2 20-minute tracks or one like 45-minute track or something, and the guitar was just one element, like a color in that.
Yeah.
And when I started recording the recent stuff, that especially the ones that came on Aussat, I started to think more about like there being a song structure,
right,
and certain sounds that I wanted, and I think the more traditional playing came from that idea of song structures.
Yeah, that's also something. We're gonna bounce around a bit, but these new albums, because Brain came out in 2020, correct?
Yes.
In 2020, you had a hell of a year. You put out like...
Yeah, it was like 5 years worth of recordings came out.
How many albums? You put out 2 CDs on Aussat, an LP on Influencing Machine.
Yeah, and 1 CD on Old Europa Cafe.
That's right. Yep.
And
on 4IB.
On 4IB,
yeah.
Yes.
And all fantastic records, which not many people can do.
They were all recorded in the span of 5 years.
Okay.
So I didn't just
go
churn them out.
You just found some time to release them, I guess. But in the years before then, I mean, I know you were very active in the early mid 2000s.
Yes.
And I have the sense that you kind of reduced activity a bit around, I don't know, 2012, so like the early 2010s. Like it kind of was a general overall kind of a lull in the noise scene, so to speak, or production. And do you see these phases as something that have also a difference for your musical output, for your creation, or was there were you consistently recording throughout this time? Were you taking a break for yourself also?
In 2009, I started playing bass in a proper band and recording like real music and playing a lot of shows. And then my son was born in 2013, and these things kind of
Yeah. Okay. Of course. Yeah.
eat the free time.
Yeah.
But
So what brought about 2020 being like a year to maybe finish all these recordings and get them released?
well, I had some more free time, and I really I wanted them out, and also Brain happened because Willie asked me if I wanted to release on outside, and I said sure. So that's basically what kind of jump started it.
The second album on Outside, which came out shortly thereafter, New Age of Death, was that then like a continuation? Or did he ask for another album, or did you say, "Oh, I have another album I'm working on"?
Yeah, I told him I have more.
What is your traditional music background? You say you don't play guitar at all, but do you have some sort of traditional music background, even in like a rock and roll punk?
I've been in bands since I was like 13, 14, but I've never had like any proper musical education,
Sure.
so to speak. But I started out, I was a vocalist first, and then mostly bass.
Do you think that being somewhat musically, if not gifted, at least literate, do you think that in general makes someone better at making noise?
I think it does. It kind of depends what kind of noise you're doing, but it's good to have some knowledge, especially some knowledge of the gear you're using.
When you're recording HAARE, do you have some sort of musical feeling or musical goal or impulse inside of you, or is it rather like chaotic?
I've been using graphic notation on some of them.
What is that exactly?
That's like making a drawing of what's going to happen in a track.
Okay, so you write you notate this stuff in the ways of Stockhausen.
Yes.
This episode of White Centipede Noise Podcast is brought to you by Adhuman, a UK-based label and mail order established in 2021. Beating its head against the twin brick walls of Brexit-induced podriatic gunfire and an obsession with the most awkward and uncooperative of musical forms, Adhuman specializes in sonic difficulties, usually unavailable in the United Kingdom. Just 2 label releases so far in the form of Josh Peterson's collected voice, text, and tape works, and Emil Bolio's Corm 88, both sold out from the source, but more planned across the remains of the year and into 2022. www.adhuman.co.uk for distro list, Bandcamp, and newsletter sign up. The name HAARE, I assume, has itself spiritual connotations and a spiritual meaning.
It actually has no meaning. I found it when I was in art school. I found, I think it was like a Klaus Wunderlich LP, and there was photos of other records on the label, and one of them was HAARE, and I looked at it and I thought like that might be some German 60s rock band, but then I realized that it's actually the Hair musical. in German.
That's awesome. That's true. That is true. Yeah.
The picture was so cool. I actually used it on one of my early tapes. It's on the cover of Trismegistos.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. That's so
And
funny because
that's where the name came from.
Okay, I assumed really that it had to do with Hare Krishna.
No.
And like I said, I know nothing about Hare Krishna actually, except for pop culture references like The Simpsons, like they make fun of him in The Simpsons, they make fun of him in Airplane, etc. So I was thinking, I need to learn about Hare Krishna a little bit so I can ask him some questions about that religion. He must be practicing that religion, and etc. And also, I'm living in Germany and I speak German, so I have your stuff laying around the house, and my girlfriend saw it. I'm like, I'm interviewing Hare, and she's like, Hare? Like she looks at it. We speak German, so she looks at it and thinks that it's like your band name is like hair.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's great. But okay, so
that's a pretty like a krautrock name.
Yeah. So that which I also assume is a pretty big influence on your music. I know. I mean, I don't like to really dwell on musical influence on other music, especially noise. Like, what's your noise band's influence? Oh, my noise band's influence is Macronympho or whatever. It's like, yeah, of course, but. I think with your music, there's a very clear non-noise musical influence on other genres. So can you tell me a little bit about the krautrock influence?
Well, I listen to a very wide style, many styles of music. Always have, but like krautrock and progressive rock in general have always been a big thing for me, and 60s psychedelia, Hendrix, stuff like that, and Hare has always been like Merzbow said that he wanted to take just the freak out parts from Hendrix and the Who. And there's something similar in mine, but I don't think it needs to be so chaotic or so noisy. When it comes to krautrock stuff that influenced Hare, I'd say the first two Tangerine Dream LPs, Cluster, and Guru Guru's UFO are probably the biggest things for me. But also, when I was a kid, Finland was a quiet, grey place. Like living in a small town in Finland, there wasn't much, but there was all sorts of interesting things in the library. So I just go and grab random records and what's this,
Yeah.
and found some like really weird stuff, like free improvisation and noisy free jazz and all kinds of cool stuff. And there's like this kind of non-musicality, the freedom to kind of make like music that's not music in a sense.
Sure. Yet I feel krautrock is still a very strict genre of music, and I hear the influence, but I also feel like your music is like it has that influence, but also has a very, very free.
Yes, it kind of depends, because some of the early cluster stuff is very like free and chaotic,
Sure.
and at the same time pretty dark.
Right. Is it still to this
But
day? Like in your most recent work, is that still kind of a strong thread coming through?
at this moment, I think I'm trying to find something new. I'm currently working on a tape for Total Black and a tape for Finalstat. And when I finish my studies in February, I will start properly recording the next LP or CD.
Great.
But I'm trying to like break some new ground again.
Sure.
I feel like this, even though all HAARE has something in common, I think.
Sure.
But it should always like break some new ground at some point.
Yeah, of course, and I think it
not,
does. I
not
mean,
make the same recording over and over again.
no, I mean the releases you put out in 2020 all have very, very distinct sounds and totally different approaches, which is, like I said, quite significant to be able to do that. Coming soon on White Centipede Noise, Altar of Flies, Otterblick Triple LP, Jason Krumer Ruth CD, Worth Sacred Violence Noise CD, K.M. Tupfer Retrace No Steps CD, Kakerlak The Heat of the Whole Temporary and Successive Stages CD, Upperpot Hot Lava Shampoo CD, The New Boyfriend's 4 CD, as well as tapes from Vincent Dallas, Moosehead, and Wince. So let's go back to my question. I wanted to get into the name HAARE and maybe your personal experience or relationship to spirituality. So HAARE is just hair, but I still notice that obviously HAARE is full of imagery and references to Buddhism. Is it
Yes.
is it strictly Buddhism?
Mostly.
Okay.
It's, with images, I've dabbled with more basic occult stuff and some Satanism and things like that. But the thing at the bottom is Buddhism.
Do you practice Buddhism?
In a sense, I've been practicing a martial art called Shorinji Kempo since 95 or 96. And Zen Buddhism is a part of Shorinji Kempo. So that kind of comes from there. I've always been into all esoteric and occult and kind of stuff because that comes from my dad, actually.
Your father?
My father was and still is into all kinds of weird New Age kind of things, and I read the books he left lying around.
Sure. And is he into it in the sense of practicing, or is it more like he's interested or kind of?
I think it's a bit of both. He's quite old now, but when he was younger, he took part in like shaman retreats and stuff like that, meditation retreats.
Yeah. So this is something you have grown up with. This is.
Yeah, I inherited it.
Sure. When it comes to spirituality or Buddhism, is this something you really do you actively involve this in HAARE when you record or when you compose or when you conceptualize HAARE? Is HAARE like a direct result of this spirituality, or is it more kind of like kind of a separate thing that kind of adapts some of these qualities?
There's an influence. I collect those Tibetan Buddhism and all kinds of Buddhist records, temple music, and I did the tape for Cult of Nihilo called Nightmare Sutra. And that was loosely composed over the Tibetan offering to the Savior combo. So I did the notation
Sure.
loosely based on the ritual song. So that is an influence. I don't go to the studio meditating or anything, but it's Buddhism and the way to think is like in everyday life. It's not something
Of course.
I just go somewhere to do, but it's because to like if you really want to put it short, like it's trying to pay attention to your thoughts and your actions and try hard not to be an asshole.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
That's good. And I mean, I see that you do involve yourself also personally in a lot of your recordings. In your recent albums, you have images of yourself also meditating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do get the sense that this is a serious part of your life. And going now to your kind of aesthetics and the way your albums are presented, do you do most of the artwork and layouts and concepts for how these albums are presented, for the artwork, so to speak?
Pretty much everything, yes.
I noticed a 60s like psycho-pop culture aesthetic coming through, like these sort of old film posters, collages which are reminiscent of the psychedelic era.
Recently it's been like I'm trying to mix the 60s psychedelic look with an 80s noise aesthetic, maybe a little, but yeah. With HAARE, I wouldn't trust anyone else with the artwork, really.
Yeah, I understand. This episode of White Centipede Noise Podcast is brought to you by Oxen Records, an independent label focused on artists in the field of harsh noise, based in Los Angeles, California. Recent releases include Peter J. Wood's Collages C30, Unsustainable Social Condition, Rapid Polarization 2 C20, Circuit Wound, A Sudden Lapse of Concentration CD, Scathing, A Capital Beneath the Waves CD, and Leah P. Surviving the Familiar CD. www.oxenrecords.bigcartel.com. There's a slogan that you use often throughout HAARE recordings that you see printed either in the liner notes or on the back. Of course, this is also the title of your most recent box set, the collection, and it's Destroy Fascism, Love Forever. What's your motivation for using this slogan? What's its meaning to you personally?
Well, my politics I've learned from napalm death in 1988, and they haven't changed since. And back in the punk years in Finland, everyone used to put Destroy Fascism or Against Fascism on their releases. And at first, I don't remember if I put it on anything, but then at some point I started putting the Destroy Fascism. And then I did the Church of Self-Obliteration, and that's dedicated to Yayoi Kusama, the Japanese artist. And the Love Forever came from her. And I thought they kind of worked together, and I've been using that ever since.
Okay. Have you ever received like blowback or criticism?
Someone online found it laughable, but I said, "You're living in Trump America. Look around you."
So this was an American. So this must have been recently.
That was like when the box came out.
Okay. But you've been using it for quite a while, and in Finland...
Yeah, no one else has said anything, but...
Okay. Interesting.
It also... Because because some people seem to think that all noise is like made by Nazis.
Right.
And I think that's really, really dumb. And I want those people to like realize that that's not the case necessarily. Yeah, but I was just talking about this recently with some friends, and I don't remember any Nazi noise projects. Like if we are talking about harsh noise, they don't exist. Like I can't think of.
Well, what about power electronics?
If we are talking, yeah, in power electronics it's different, and like in the 80s it was just purely for provocation.
Sure.
Like if you take someone like Gary Mundy, is he a Nazi? No, he's not. But many people in, for example, I know many Finnish experimental musicians or more like academic musicians, and they think all noise is some Nazi banking with a gas mask on.
Sure.
And that's not the case, really. It's the noise scene is so big, and there's so many different things happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Even in Finland itself, I mean, Finland is really a wellspring of noise. There's a very distinct style in some ways. There's something that kind of makes it Finnish sounding, or at least feeling. Yeah. Yet there's still a lot of really, really a great diversity to the projects and the sound. What in your eyes are some of the defining characteristics of Finnish noise, if any?
I really don't know, like, if there are any, because there are so many different styles happening, and there's recently like these new bands and new projects starting. This, like, people half my age are starting to find noise, and I think that's really cool. And many of those projects are really good.
Yeah, I've really been into Apropot.
Yeah, me too.
And this guy Viho and his project, the new boyfriends. I must admit I don't follow everything. Oftentimes, shamefully enough, because I find Finnish names sometimes hard to remember, or at least like save into my memory. So there'll be new Finnish projects coming out with Finnish language names, and I just I can't really like register them all. So I think I probably gloss over or miss a lot of things, because it's like another Finnish noise project. I can't remember if that's the one I already knew or if that's a different one. Do you think there's something inherent to Finnish culture or history, either artistically, socioeconomically, that breeds quite an active noise scene and kind of a maybe more general acceptance to noise?
Probably, yes. It's like when I was growing up, as I said, Finland was a grey place. This town felt almost like a Soviet country. But since, let's see, someone who's now in their 20s, they've grown up in like a culture that embraces culture and art and is wealthy and so on. They've probably had a like opportunities and seen a lot of different things. Like I remember when I heard that Merzbow is coming to Helsinki, and I was like, that's pretty much impossible. but then he did play.
When was that?
There, and
roughly
and early 2000s, late 90s,
Wow.
something like that.
Peak. Yeah.
But like, I think it's a socio-economic thing probably for these new guys, and of course they have the internet.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
They find everything.
Of course, which flattens everything. But I've heard certain people say that kind of this isolation also that Finland had maybe in the previous generation, maybe in your generation, also kind of harbored like an internal scene somehow, maybe in the pre-internet days. That
Yeah, probably. And like, if you think, for example, of the metal scene,
yeah.
that didn't exist when I was a teenager.
Okay.
When I was like getting into metal, the idea of a Finnish metal band was pretty much laughable.
Uh-huh.
There was a handful of them, and they weren't really good.
Huh.
And then just like it took a couple of years, and then it just all blew up, and
Wow.
amazing bands
Sure, yeah.
just appeared.
Yeah.
But that was probably very much due to the isolation.
Sure. There's also a rural kind of sound to a lot of Finnish noise.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's kind of now
We only
self-referencing,
have a
maybe,
few
that people
cities.
say, okay, now we're in Finland, we make rural noise, and it's kind of like a thing, but there's a very, very rural feel to it, especially a lot of even the newer stuff.
Finland basically has like 4 cities. If we are talking a city in a sense of like a city like Berlin or something,
Yeah.
like we have Helsinki, Oulu, Tampere. Like I released the Day of the Antler CD
Yes.
recently.
Yes.
He lives in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, tell me about this a little bit, and this guy and his recordings and your relationship to it.
I've been in contact with him since the early 2000s, and he had some like psych bands, and he used to send me CDRs, and then he started, I don't know when he started making this industrial stuff, but his releases were always like limited to 10 or 15 handmade tapes in cloth bags and these like really amazing, beautiful things and great stuff. And I said to him that if you're interested, I'd like to release something by you to get even a slightly wider audience. And he doesn't really want a wide audience. But it took some time to talk him into it, but then he agreed. And then he sent me a message that, yeah, I've been working on new stuff and I have this thing
Great.
now. It's ready now. Want to hear it? And he sent it to me, and I said, yes, let's release this.
So is there quite long back catalog of this guy's work dating back to the early 2000s?
I have like 3 tapes
Okay.
of his, and maybe like 2-3 CDRs of his band, his old rock band. But those Day of the Antler tapes, I think I have 3, and I think he's done a couple more, but not that many.
Sure. Outside of HAARE, you have released numerous things under different names, and you've also released something on White Centipede Noise, a project called Savage Gospel, which is you, and please tell me how to pronounce his name, because it's another Finnish name.
Janne Laurila.
Can you tell me a little bit about his background?
He played in those, there was this thing called free folk or freak folk in the 90s with bands like Kemialliset Ystävät, and Janne played in Avarus and the Anaximandros, but he's also one of the first people to make harsh noise in Finland.
Wow.
When he was a teenager in Oulu, he had a project called 0.1% that made one tape of harsh noise.
I love that name.
Yeah, that was like sometime in the 90s. And he made a webzine called Paraffin. And he interviewed like Government Alpha and Macronymfa and Lasse Marhaug.
Yeah.
And some of those can't be found if you use the Wayback Machine.
Wow, that's great.
But since that, he moved to Tampere and became a pop star.
A pop star?
Yeah, he was a minor pop star at some point. And that's like the coolest thing about Savage Gospel.
Wow.
Like some people remember him.
That's great. I have to...
That guy's, that Laurila, the pop star.
Okay, and that's good to know. I have to dig into that. It's,
I mean, he was never like hugely successful, but I think he still occasionally releases some pop songs. And he was also had this project called Office Building, which was that was quite known, even internationally at some point.
Oh, cool. And so, what's the approach to Savage Gospel versus HAARE? Obviously, the sound, is very, very harsh.
It's just like make noise.
Are you using guitar in it as well?
No. It's like scrap metal and microphones and pedals, pretty much only those. And
do you record live in the sense of like with each other, or is there any male recording?
Yeah. We set a date and go to my band's rehearsal studio and just record.
Is that something that you see developing and lasting into the future, or is that kind of a project that could have a time limit?
Well, we both like doing it, so
yeah.
as long as it's fun, we just agreed to go record a new album in January, and we bought artwork for it.
Wow!
Because we had this idea that there's this old artist in Tampere who he's made a ton of album covers. In the 70s, he did them for like punk bands, and since then he's made them for like really big Finnish rock bands.
Cool.
And I said to Janne that, do you know that guy, or can you get in contact with him and let's ask how much he wants? That I made a rough sketch of the picture and sent it to him, and we paid him for it. And
what's his name?
Juho Juntunen.
Great. And so that's planned for an upcoming album. Have you already recorded the album and know who's releasing it?
No, we are recording that in January, and we are thinking maybe you are releasing it.
If the artwork is good enough.
I'm not sure if the artwork will be the front cover, but we are making T-shirts of it, and probably use it at least on the back cover, if not the front. We'll see.
This episode of White Centipede Noise Podcast is brought to you by Flag Day Recordings. Established in 2017, Flag Day Recordings is a tape and CD label based out of Pennsylvania, focused on promoting harsh noise, avant-garde, musique concrète, electroacoustic, and ambient styles. Recent CDs include Mariam Sirvan, Peter J. Woods, and Tourette. flagdayrecordings.bigcartel.com. In the early years of HAARE, there were labels active like Abisco, Unrest, a lot of labels that aren't very active right now. Are you still in contact with a lot of those people that released your earlier music?
No, I'm still in contact with them. I came into contact with most of those guys through the Southern Lord Records forum.
You mean originally?
Yeah. I met like Martin from Unrest. Mm-hmm. I met him there, and I think also Tommy Carlson. Mm-hmm. I spoke to him there first. Of course, they played in Helsinki with Porveto Magus, but I don't think we knew each other then. Mm-hmm. But I'm still in contact with them. But yeah, the labels are pretty much on hiatus at least.
A certain time span or a certain lifespan.
Yes. Some of those early labels have like completely disappeared.
Sure. And your recent stuff has been coming out seemingly also on a variety, but you have two albums, for example, on Aussat. Do you feel like kind of an affinity to working with a label multiple times once you've kind of established a good relationship with them? Is it something?
Yeah, it's also this is good to work with because they are so professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost like too professional for me. but yes, like.
Do you find a lot of the people that maybe listened to your, like, that were really tapped into HAARE in the mid-2000s, do you find that they are also really listening to and picking up your new albums, or do you find you're also getting a newer audience that maybe didn't always, didn't know about HAARE back then or didn't have as much exposure?
I think there are some, like, there's a newer generation. But then there are people who have been there all the time.
Yeah.
The same, if I'm selling something myself, I can expect to get an email from several people.
The usual suspects.
Every time. the same people every time. Send me one of those.
I think it's great because actually, I mean, I have... Like, I'm from the States, so all my noise collection is back actually boxed up in Minneapolis. And around the time I started getting into noise and collecting it was sort of like the tail end of that golden era, what I say, golden era of like 2010s or 2000s noise. So I have some HAARE stuff from that era, maybe a couple tapes, but not much. And it really wasn't until recently and these newer albums that have been coming out on great labels like Aussat, and in combination with this box set, I had the ability then to go back and revisit all that stuff. Maybe it happened accidentally, but it was a really great way for people to discover your entire catalog.
The thing about the box set is that it was supposed to come out maybe like 10 years earlier. And there were, I think, 4 or 5 different labels involved, and it was supposed to be on vinyl.
Wow.
and then like everyone just kind of dropped out of the...
It's great. I think it's really great that it came out on CD though, because it's affordable, it's practical, it's very high quality, it's beautifully presented. I want to actually jump back into some questions about HAARE's connection to spirituality and things like that. I know we covered this already, but there's a sigil inside this box set, which I'll show here. Aha, you have it. Aha.
Yes.
Awesome. What is this? The text with the CD says, HAARE sigil from Magillinen Teatterishow in Tampere. So tell me about that, and tell me about the creation of the sigil and what that means to you.
There's a group of people in Tampere who arranged these festivals, and they never gave out the info of who's playing, but they had posters made with like symbols.
Mm-hmm.
And the year we played, that was our symbol. But the symbols are designed by this guy who made them. Well, I can't say his name. His name is Samuli Huttunen. He's famous for designing the Oranssi Pazuzu bird logo, for example. But the sigils are made using Austin Osman Spare's magical something. they are like proper occult symbols. And I have 3 tattoos that I've had made at a proper tattoo parlor, and I have that one that's for my band Ceremonia, and then the other one which is for HAARE, and then on my leg there's a drawing of a mouse that my son made.
Nice.
That I'm not going to stretch and show you.
The best one of all. Currently available from White Centipede Noise, Aaron Dilloway and Jeff German, Casual Collision CD, co-released with New Forces. Various artists, Lacerations double CD, co-released with Tronics. Sewer Election and Trix Rusit, Killing for Germany, Rugsfett CD. Testicle Hazard, 5060 LP. So the HAARE symbol was designed for this show, basically, to identify your band.
Yes.
And you said we actually here, so that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. HAARE is sometimes joined by other musicians or other collaborators. Is that true?
Janne Martinkauppi has been with me ever since I was asked to play live. Because there was this, I think the first, can't remember if it was the first HAARE show ever or the first one in Helsinki. Might have been the first ever. And I was asked to play Noise Night at Kuudeslinja in Helsinki. And I wanted to do it, but I knew I couldn't do it alone.
Sure.
So Janne was, back then, he had a harsh noise project called Hinageshi Bondage, who released a couple of 7 inches and a CDR. But I asked him if he wanted to join me, and he said yes, and he's been playing with me live ever since. And he's on some recordings too, but...
Has having another member or another person involved influenced your sound or approach at all?
Yes, I think the live thing is very different. Janne has quite a lot to do in the live setting, because when playing live, I only play guitar.
You're the rock star.
Yeah, and he does the gongs, and we sometimes we discuss if he's using like loops. Then I want to check them before the show, like what they're like. But I have complete trust in him.
So he's actually doing things on his own, of his own creation, not just things that you've handed him to do.
Yeah.
Is that hard for you to do? Is it hard for you to give up control of projects in general to other people? Like, you mentioned artwork. You wouldn't maybe trust everyone to. Is that?
It depends. I mean, we have talked about recording an album of HAARE together, like properly, but that hasn't happened yet. We were going to record in this big silo in Helsinki before the pandemic, but now that's been on hold. But maybe we'll do that someday.
So he does gongs and stuff like that. When did you start incorporating these kinds of elements to HAARE? Because I feel like a lot of the early recordings are pretty strict, not strict, but they sound like they're kind of guitar noise. There are lots of things going on, but kind of all maybe through one channel, kind of compact. And then at some point, HAARE's sound evolves where you have layers going on that are not necessarily tied to each other, and you have gong and you have different synthesizers in addition to this guitar. And when did that start happening?
That probably happened quite early.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was recording The Temple, which was the first pro-printed CD, and I think that came in 2003. And that was the first time when I was actually using like multi-track recording. Before that, it was all in.
Do you record to a computer, or what do you use to record to?
These days I have a Zoom, but I also still use tape. I've always used like recording to cassette tape and then transferring that to computer. And I still use the same old cracked software from like late 90s.
Sure. So when you do multi-tracking, are you doing the multi-tracking in a tape deck, in a 4-track itself, or are you recording the tracks individually to tape and then arranging and editing them in computer?
Editing on the computer.
Okay.
I record like one instrument at a time, usually. The possibilities these days are like way too vast.
Right.
That's why I haven't updated my technology.
Sure.
because it does what I want it to do, but the thing for recording one instrument at a time is just because when I recorded The Temple, that was the time when I realized that I could like start composing it and bring the psychedelic elements in, and I always thought of like there being instruments, like feedback is a guitar, a bass drone is the bass, metal junk is the percussion, and so on. So it's like basically the setup of a rock band.
Sure.
But done in noise. If I had the right people, I could probably make HAARE a 4-member band.
That would be great. You should.
That way, but I don't have the right people.
I think you should do that. I think that's a really great idea. I think even just for live performance, well, you do it maybe already for live performance in a way because you have another member. But I think that'd be so cool to have.
Actually, before the pandemic hit, me and Janne talked about getting Antti Klemi of Absolute Key.
Awesome! Wow.
And recording something as a 3-piece, and that's something I've actually forgotten about. Maybe we should start thinking about that.
Definitely, I love the idea of noise bands.
That's what was so appealing to me about Hishokaiden.
Yeah,
because they are like they are a rock band.
Yeah.
but the result is not exactly.
But I think that approach is also quite Finnish, that we see this in a lot of Finnish projects doing this kind of approach. I mean, even Bizarre Uproar kind of, well, originally was a noisecore band or came out of the noisecore band, but even some of their later recordings.
Yeah, the last time I saw them, they had a bass player.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the New Boyfriends, this new project from Vilho.
Yeah.
He actually just sent me a master for something that's going to come out on White Centipede Noise, and it's like, you know, it's recorded in a barn, and it's totally amp recordings, and they even go fully on in one song and make like a musical. It's like big bang drum, macronympha, like musical rhythmic playing with metal junks as a drum kit almost. And with harsh feedback and noise as like a guitar, and it's awesome.
Yes,
I mean,
that would be nice.
It's super nice. This episode of White Centipede Noise Podcast is brought to you by Oxidation. Oxidation started as an archival label to renew interest in older CDR noise releases. More recently, Oxidation has released CDs by Molest, PBK and Modelbau, SR Meixner, and Beatong. Some releases focus on special packaging, such as Azoicum's Oral Purgatory, packaged in old fence parts and hardware cloth. Check out everything available at oxidation.bandcamp.com or oxidationlabel.bigcartel.com. Use code WCN for 10% off. Top 5 noise records of all time.
I recently answered an interview in this fanzine, and
don't look at the fanzine. Tell me off the top of your head. Don't look at.
I want to check my list.
I want to know your list right now.
They gave them a top 10, and well, if I give them off the top of my head, they will be the same. MOT is
Mote.
That tape that came on CD recently. The title is, I'll check, Life in a Peaceful New World.
Yes.
The Rita, Night of the Living Dead Girl.
Okay.
Hijokaidan Romance. I had to pick one Hijokaidan. It was a tie between that and Ferocity of Practical Life. Mm-hmm. Incapacitance, As Loud as Possible. That was my first Incapacitance. Still the one I like most.
Yeah.
And then Macronympha's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the top 5.
What are your top 5 releases that have come out in the past year?
That's really hard to answer, because I don't think I've bought 5. Like I've mostly bought reissues.
Then give me your top 3. Top 3 newer noise releases that stick out to you.
Well, I've been listening to the Altar of Flies Work Ethics, and that's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's so unique. I really liked the Kakerlak Motel Dwelling.
Yep,
that's a reissue.
But still, I'll let that count.
The Knives CD, that's a reissue too. But that's something that most people, I think, didn't realize happening.
Yeah,
because it's
Phil Blankenship and John Borges. That's and
it's still available. And it's like
okay. So 2 reissues.
Really mostly reissues. And Macronympha's Grind came out on Influencing Machine.
Yeah, also reissue.
That's I was for some time had been looking for the tape, but it's nice to have on CD.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel about this wave of reissues that's coming out since? I mean, I think since 2020. I think since the pandemic kind of hit the.
I think it's cool. I think it's cool that some of the stuff hasn't like. It's felt that they haven't been so appreciated, and now they are bringing them back. But that's a good thing. Hey, one thing that came to mind: Testicle Hazard, Kiki and Castor.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's awesome, and everything that Jana has done.
Ah, okay.
YANA.
Yes. Cool.
The new project from Lahti. That's
a newer project?
Yeah.
Cool.
I've never met the guy, but I think he's like a younger.
Yeah, cool. I'll have to check it
dude.
out. All right, Ilkka, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for joining me this morning. And please, everyone, check out the most recent HAARE material. Most of it's still available. And definitely check out the box set that came out in Freak Animal last year. All right, thank you, Ilkka, and have a nice Sunday.
You too.
Thank you for tuning into White Centipede Noise Podcast. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so via Patreon, which is linked in the video's description.